I was slapped by my school chairman without reason, falsely accused by my best friend, betrayed by my own cousin, used by everyone around me, and silenced for years. This is my story of pain, lies, and finding the strength to speak up. I was 10 years old, 5th class, just a skinny, wide-eyed kid, trying to understand a world far bigger than I could grasp. I wasn't loud. I wasn't a troublemaker. If anything, I was invisible to most, content with my small circle of friends, my books, and daydreams about what life might look like beyond the school walls. My best friend back then, let's call him Aryan, was the kind of boy who always seemed to know what was going on. He was charismatic, louder than me, confident in a way that made people listen. We sat together, played together, laughed about stupid things. He was the only one I trusted with my secrets, the only one I thought would never hurt me one day. During a lunch break, he leaned in with a sly grin. "Bro, you know that girl? She's been looking at you. She likes you." I blinked. "Who? Why?" He just laughed. "I'm telling you, she has a crush on you. I'm gonna go talk to her." I didn't even get a chance to respond. I didn't say yes. I didn't ask him to do anything. He just walked off, leaving me standing under the neem tree near the school gate. Heart pounding, not out of excitement, but confusion. I didn't understand crushes or flirting. At that age, I barely understood myself. The next few days were quiet. Strange, I noticed people whispering more. Some classmates looked at me differently, but no one said anything. I thought maybe I was imagining it. That was until the day everything cracked. It was after the morning assembly, sun already blazing over our heads. I was walking back toward the classroom when the school chairman's tall, strict man known for his iron discipline approached me. Without a word, without a question, without a flicker of humanity, he slapped me hard. His hand crashed against my cheek, my ears ringing. I stumbled backward, too shocked to cry. "What are you doing?" he barked. "Is this what you came here for? If I hear one more complaint, you'll be thrown out of this school." That was it. No explanation, no chance to speak. Just a verdict, a punishment, and a threat. I stood there in silence, my face burning. Kids watched. Some laughed, some just stared. No one helped. No one even asked what happened. I didn't understand what I had done. I didn't even have the words to defend myself. All I knew was that I had never felt so small, so humiliated, so broken. When I got home that day, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't know how to explain it. I was afraid they'd believe him too, that maybe they'd think I did something wrong, that maybe I deserved it. But fate wasn't done yet. That same evening, Aryan's mother came to our house. I remember her face vividly tight with rage, eyes narrowed in judgment, as if I was some criminal she had to confront. She didn't knock gently. She stormed in. She pointed a shaking finger at me and said things I didn't fully understand. But the message was clear. I was bad. I had done something wrong. I was a disgrace. My mother looked shocked. My father stood stiffly beside her, unsure what to say. I wanted to scream. I didn't do anything, but the words were stuck. I was so afraid, so ashamed. Aryan stood behind her, not saying a word, not defending me, not explaining what he'd told that girl or what really happened. That night I cried myself to sleep, and I remember thinking, why me? What did I do? But no answers came. In the days that followed, the school never clarified what happened. The teachers looked at me with suspicion. Some avoided eye contact. My classmates treated me like someone contagious, like I had a stain that wouldn't wash off. The silence around me grew louder. I stopped laughing, I stopped trusting, I stopped being a kid. That slap wasn't just a physical blow. It was the start of a long, invisible punishment I would carry. For years, the punishment of being misunderstood. Even now, 15 years later, I still don't know what exactly triggered that event. But I remember the pain, I remember the betrayal, I remember the feeling of being thrown away like trash over something I didn't do. And that moment, it changed everything. After that slap, everything changed. It wasn't just the bruise on my face, it was the bruise inside me. The kind that no one could see but that colored everything. I remember walking through the school corridors after that day like a ghost, like someone who didn't belong anymore. I wasn't the same boy who used to giggle with his friends or share snacks at lunch. I was now the boy who got slapped, the boy who must have done something. People don't ask for truth, they assume. They believe the loudest voice, the angriest face, the most dramatic accusation. And when no one stands up for you, when even your so-called best friend stays silent, you begin to believe their version of you might be true. I started questioning myself. Did I say something wrong? Did I unknowingly cross some line? Am I really a bad person? But how could I be, when I hadn't even done anything? My parents noticed the change in me. I didn't talk much at home anymore. I stayed in my room more. I began drawing a lot, not because I was an artist, but because I needed an escape. A place where no one slapped, no one judged. Just me, my imagination, and silence. Then came that evening, the one when Aryan's mother barged into our house. I was sitting on the floor, working on some homework, when the door burst open. She didn't even greet my parents. She walked in like a storm and started yelling. Her voice cracked like thunder. She accused me of corrupting her son, of spoiling a girl's life, of being one of those boys. I didn't even know what those boys meant at the time. All I knew was that her eyes were full of fire and disgust. She looked at me like I wasn't even human. My parents were confused. My father tried to reason with her. "What are you talking about? What happened?" But she didn't explain, just kept pointing at me, as if my existence was enough of an explanation. Aryan stood behind her with his head down. He wouldn't even look at me. He didn't say a word. He didn't stop her. He didn't defend me. He just let me burn after she left. There was a horrible silence in our house. My mother looked at me with a mixture of worry and disbelief. "What is going on?" she asked. I wanted to scream. "I don't know," but I didn't. I just said quietly, "I didn't do anything," and that was the first of many times I would say those words in my life. Over the following months, I began to notice how people treated me differently. I was no longer invited to birthday parties. Parents of classmates gave me suspicious glances. Teachers spoke to me with a certain coldness. It was like a scarlet letter had been stitched into my soul. I kept hoping it would go away, that things would go back to normal. But in small towns and small schools, rumors have long lives. Eventually, I begged my parents to let me switch schools. I said I hated the commute. I said the teachers were mean. I lied about my grades. I couldn't tell them the real reason that every day in that school felt like walking into a courtroom where I had already been sentenced. When they finally agreed, it felt like a second chance, a fresh start. But fresh starts are never truly clean when you're still bleeding inside. The next school was bigger, louder, and more chaotic. I thought I would be okay there, thought I could disappear into the crowd and be someone new, and for a short time, I did. But then came the new set of friends. One of them, I'll call him Kunal, was the kind of boy who always had drama following him like a shadow. He hated his father, always fighting, always angry. His voice was loud and his fists even louder. Yet he latched onto me like a brother. He'd come over after school, sometimes stay the night, even spend weekends at our house when his parents were fighting. I let him into my life. I listened to his stories. I shared my snacks. I thought maybe this time I had someone who needed me, not just wanted to use me. But life doesn't work that way for people like me. One day, his mother came to my house. She didn't slap me, but her words stung just as much. She stood at our front door with the same look of disgust I had seen years ago on Aryan's mom. "You think you're a good influence," she said. "You think I don't know what boys like you do?" My parents were once again caught off guard, blindsided by accusations. They didn't understand, and I stood there, heart racing, wondering how many more times I would have to go through this. How many times do I have to be accused without proof? How many times do I have to be punished just for being someone others find easy to blame? And then, after school ended, Kunal disappeared, blocked me, ignored my texts, never even said goodbye. Just like Aryan, people only need you until they don't, then they vanish, and you're left trying to figure out whether you were ever truly seen at all. Asterisk. They say blood is thicker than water, but no one talks about what happens when the blood itself turns cold. I had a cousin, let's call him Arjun, from the outside. We looked close, we played together as kids. Our families celebrated holidays under the same roof. He would smile at me when others were around, call me bro, act like we were best friends. But there was something in that smile, something rehearsed, something sharp behind the teeth. As we grew older, I began to notice things subtle, small at first. He always wanted to know what I was working on, what I was planning, where I wanted to go in life. He'd ask questions that felt innocent on the surface, but deep down, I knew he wasn't asking because he cared. He was gathering information. Every time I shared a dream, it would somehow find its way into family gossip. Every time I worked on a new goal, whether it was a project, an entrance exam, or just learning something new, he would either subtly discourage me, or suddenly act like he had the same plan. It was like he was always one step behind me, not to walk with me, but to sabotage the path I was building. Sometimes he'd make jokes in front of others. "You think you'll actually do that? You really?" It always came with a laugh, a playful nudge. But I could feel the venom underneath. He would hide things from me too. Opportunities, competitions, scholarships, anything that might help me grow. And when I found out later and asked him about it, he'd shrugged, play dumb. "I didn't think you'd be interested," he'd say, but I was. He knew I was. There was this one time I remembered clearly. I had been preparing for a college interview. I had my plan, my ideas. I had even started building a small portfolio. One night I shared it with him, thinking maybe he'd support me. Instead, the next day, I found him using those same ideas, talking about them to others, claiming them as his own. When I confronted him, he gave me that same rehearsed smile. "Relax, bro. It's not that deep," but it was. To me, it was everything. He made me doubt my instincts, my worth. He made me feel like no idea I had could be mine, like I was just a rehearsal space for his performance. And the worst part, everyone else thought he was charming, thought we were just like brothers. They didn't see the manipulation. They didn't hear the sarcasm behind the compliments. They didn't feel the weight of constantly being observed, calculated, mirrored, erased. Family dinners became unbearable. I would speak and he would interrupt. I would suggest something and he would twist it into a joke. If I stayed quiet, he'd call me boring. If I spoke, he'd call me arrogant. I was stuck. He never hit me, never yelled, never made open threats. But he killed me slowly with smiles. Sometimes, I wonder if it would have been easier if you were cruel in obvious ways. Then at least someone might have believed me. But emotional manipulation is invisible to outsiders. It leaves no bruises, only confusion. The truth is, I started censoring myself around him, stopped sharing, stopped dreaming out loud, stopped trying to impress anyone. And that's when I realized something horrifying. I was shrinking myself just to avoid his shadow. A cousin, a family member, someone who was supposed to lift me, protect me was now the reason I doubted my own light. I remember one night in particular, we were at a family gathering, sitting outside under the stars. I had just finished high school and was quietly proud of how far I'd come despite everything. He sat beside me and casually said, "You know, I don't think you'll actually get into that college you're aiming for. Not with your confidence level." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said it softly with a fake concerned tone. Like he was doing me a favor by reminding me of my limits. And in that moment, I didn't respond. I just nodded, not because I agreed, but because I was tired of being nice, tired of explaining, tired of defending myself in a family where no one saw what was happening behind closed smiles. Years later, people still say, "You and Arjun were so close." Right, I just smile back now. The same kind of smile he taught me, one that hides more than it reveals. But deep down, I know, closeness built on envy is not closeness, it's a trap, and I walked into it with open arms. Trust is a fragile thing. It takes years to build on, one moment to destroy. There are wounds that bleed, and there are wounds that don't but change you forever. This was one of those. It happened when I was 19. I had just started to feel like I could maybe rebuild something: confidence, identity, even a sense of direction. I had joined a new course, met new people, and among them was someone I considered a best friend. Let's call her Maya. She was smart, funny, and had a way of making people feel heard. We clicked instantly. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not judged, not pitied, just accepted. We talked late into the nights, shared music, stories, insecurities. I told her about my past, bits of it, the pain, the betrayals, the moments that broke me. She listened with soft eyes, nodding like she understood. She became my person, at least. That's what I thought. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. I started noticing the red flags, but too late. She began growing distant, colder, but at the same time, oddly possessive. If I spoke to other girls, she'd make comments. If I didn't message her first, she'd get passive. And when I asked what was wrong, she'd smile and say, "Nothing, don't worry about it." I worried. Then one evening, I got a call from a classmate. "Hey, I don't know if it's true or not, but Maya's been saying some stuff about you I didn't understand." "What kind of stuff?" He paused. "Serious stuff, like she's saying you made her uncomfortable, that you crossed some boundaries." My heart stopped. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. The same person who had always been terrified of crossing lines, who lived in guilt and self-doubt because of other people's accusations. No, this couldn't be real, but it was. The next day, I saw people looking at me differently again, like back in school. Whispers, avoidance, cold glances. I tried to talk to her. "Maya, what's going on? What's happening?" She looked at me like I was a stranger. Her voice was calm, but distant. "I just said how I felt. If you made me uncomfortable, that's my truth. But I never should cut me off. I don't want to talk about it." That was it. No proof, no explanation, no confrontation. Just an invisible label, stuck to my name without trial. Predator, creep, unsafe. I had done nothing. And yet again I was back where I began. Back in the courtroom with no defense. Back in the echo of silence, shame, and confusion. I didn't sleep that week. I couldn't eat. I was too afraid to check my phone, too scared someone else would call, that someone else would believe her. I kept replaying every conversation with her, every joke, every moment I smiled. Had I said something wrong? Had I laughed too loud? Had I been too open? I blamed myself for things I didn't do. Because that's what trauma does. It convinces you that if something bad happens, it must be your fault. But deep down I knew the truth. She was using my silence against me, my kindness, my openness. She knew how much I feared being misunderstood, and she used it to hurt me. I don't know why. Maybe she wanted attention. Maybe she was angry I didn't love her the way she expected. Maybe she just needed someone to punish for her own pain. But it didn't matter, because the damage was done. No formal case was filed, thank God. Maybe she knew it wouldn't stand. Maybe she just wanted to see me squirm. Maybe she just wanted power. I'll never know. But emotionally, that was a prison I sat in for months. I stopped talking to people again. I deleted social media. I stopped trusting women. I stopped trusting myself. What if I really was the problem? What if all the people in my life weren't wrong? What if I was broken beyond repair? I walked around feeling like a loaded gun, someone could trigger at any time. There's something deeply terrifying about being accused of something so vile, so serious, especially when you've done nothing, when there's no physical evidence, no one screaming, but your life starts bleeding. Anyway, and the scariest part, some people believed her, not because of anything I did, but because it's easier to believe a lie when it comes from a confident voice, especially when your truth is quiet. I survived that year by becoming numb. I buried myself in books. I avoided friendships. I stopped being myself, because every time I was myself, people found a way to weaponize it. Even now, years later, I flinch when someone accuses another person of something serious, not because I doubt victims, but because I was a victim of a lie. And no one talks about that side. No one talks about the trauma of being falsely accused, about the nights you lie awake wondering if your life is over, about the shame that doesn't leave even when the truth is on your side. No one talks about people like me, but I exist, and I'm still healing. Asterisk. By the time I turned 20, I had already lived through more betrayal than some people see in a lifetime. Each time I let someone in, they left with a part of me, not just memories, not just stories, but pieces of my trust, my innocence, my hope. I started noticing a pattern, one that was always there, but I had been too naive, too hopeful, too desperate to belong to see it clearly. People only come to take. They show up with smiles, with laughter, with attention when they need something, a place to stay, someone to listen, a distraction from their own darkness, an emotional sponge. And I always gave my time, I gave my energy, I gave my heart without keeping anything for myself, because deep down, I thought, maybe if I'm kind enough, helpful enough, needed enough, they won't leave this time. But they always did, one by one. I think the first time I truly saw it was with Kunal, the friend who used my house as an escape, then ghosted me the moment his life got better. At first I told myself, he must be busy, maybe he's going through something. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. No messages, no calls, no explanation. Just silence. Then there was another guy, Samar. He came into my life during a tough semester, drowning in anxiety. I helped him through it, stayed up late when he needed to talk, covered for him in class, gave him every ounce of energy I had. He passed, he smiled, and then he vanished. No goodbye, no thank you, just a digital disappearance. And yet, when I needed help, even just a word of support, he was nowhere to be found. It became a cycle. Someone would come, they'd be broken. I'd fix them at the cost of my own mental health, and then they'd leave, lighter, while I stayed heavier. I became a station people passed through, never a destination. At first, I blamed them. How could they? How could they use me like that? But later, the blame turned inward. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I attract these people because I don't have boundaries. Maybe I deserve to be left. I started questioning every kindness I gave, every message I sent, every friendship I tried to build. I felt like a vending machine. Put in a little attention, get what you need, walk away. No one ever asked if I was okay. No one ever stayed when I was the one falling apart. I remember once being really sick, both physically and mentally. I didn't tell anyone at first, but when I finally reached out, hoping for a tiny sign of care, most people replied with, "Damn, that sucks. Hope you feel better." And then silence. But the next week, someone messaged me needing help with a resume. Another wanted advice on their relationship. Someone else needed notes from class. They all remembered me when they needed something, not when I needed anything. So I began to withdraw, not out of anger but out of self-preservation. I stopped initiating conversations, stopped offering help before it was asked, stopped volunteering my time, my ears, my heart. And when I did that, guess what happened? Most of them disappeared completely. They were never really my friends. They were just people passing through my warmth on their way to someplace else. There were nights I sat alone, phone in hand, watching the contact list, wondering if I disappeared today, how many of these people would notice. The number was smaller than I wanted to believe. But that realization, it set me free, because, for the first time, I stopped chasing love through sacrifice. I stopped believing that I needed to break myself to be worth keeping. People come to take, it's what many of them do. But now I don't give everything so easily, because I've learned my soul is not a charity, and I deserve more than being someone's temporary comfort. I deserve someone who stays. Asterisk. There's a kind of silence that's peaceful, and there's a kind that screams. I used to think silence was safety, that if I just stayed quiet, if I didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't push back, then people wouldn't hurt me, that if I kept my head down, stayed invisible, maybe life would leave me alone. But silence isn't safety, not when it's built from fear. And over time, my silence stopped being a choice. It became a habit, then a shield, then a prison. After years of being misunderstood, blamed, used, and abandoned, I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped telling people how I felt. I stopped reacting when someone crossed the line. It didn't feel worth it anymore. What was the point? When I cried as a child, people told me to be strong. When I defended myself as a teen, they said I was being too sensitive. When I opened up as a young adult, they used my vulnerability against me. So I shut it all down. I learned to smile on command, to say I'm fine even when my chest burned with unsaid words, to listen to others while burying my own needs deeper and deeper inside. And at some point, I lost my voice. Not literally, but emotionally, spiritually. I lost a part of me that believed I deserved to be heard. There were times I wanted to scream, to grab someone by the shoulders and say, "Please, just listen to me for once. Please believe I'm not who they said I was. Please see the real me." But my throat would close, the words would rise and then dissolve. So I nodded. I laughed when I didn't want to. I apologized for things that weren't my fault. I said yes when I meant no. I let people walk all over me just so they wouldn't leave. Because deep down, I was still that 10-year-old boy who got slapped without knowing why. Still that teenager who watched his friend vanish. Still that young man falsely accused by someone he trusted. The silence became my armor. But armor is heavy, and when you wear it too long, you forget what it feels like to breathe. At night, I'd lie awake and talk to myself in whispers. I wish someone knew. I wish I could explain. I wish I wasn't so alone. But even in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself anymore. I wasn't alive. I was just surviving day by day. Wordless, emotionless, numb. Friends would ask you, okay, I'd smile. Yeah, just tired. Family would say, you've changed. I'd nod. Just busy. But inside, I was screaming, begging, drowning in a silence so loud it felt like it would crush my lungs. There was one day I remember it too clearly. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, and I just stared at the screen. So many contacts, so many names, yet I couldn't think of a single person I felt safe calling. I typed a message, I don't think I'm okay. Then I deleted it because I knew how the conversation would go. They'd say, oh, don't say that, you'll be fine, just take a break. Others have it worse. And that's the thing, when you're silent long enough, even the people who should know better forget to ask the right questions. They stop looking beneath the smile. They stop hearing the words you don't say. So I stayed quiet and the silence swallowed me whole. I became so good at hiding pain that even I forgot it was there until one day I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, I don't know this person. Not because I had changed, but because I had disappeared piece by piece, sacrificed to keep others comfortable, erased so others didn't feel guilty, silenced so they didn't have to confront what they did. And the worst part, no one noticed. Silence is not peace. Silence is not healing. Silence is just the sound of trauma pretending to be strength. But I'm tired of pretending because I deserve to be heard, even if my voice shakes, even if no one understands, even if it's just a whisper. It's mine, and I'm taking it back. When the noise fades and the people are gone, what's left? You, and the shadows, not the kind that live in the corners of your room, but the ones inside, the ones that whisper in your own voice, the ones that wear your face and remind you of everything you tried to forget. I spent so many nights alone, not just physically, but emotionally. Even in rooms full of people, I felt like a ghost walking through echoes. But when I was truly alone, that's when the shadows came. They sat with me in silence. They showed me memories I didn't ask to see. They repeated old voices I tried to erase. You're too sensitive. You made them uncomfortable. No one stays. No one cares. And the worst one, maybe they were right about you. I started having long conversations in my head. Not dramatic ones, quiet ones. Little moments where I'd ask myself things like, do I even know who I am anymore? Do I want to be here tomorrow? Would anyone miss me if I disappeared? I wasn't looking for attention. I wasn't trying to be tragic. I was trying to make sense of myself in a world that never gave me space to be real, because for so long I wasn't living for me. I was living to please, to serve, to survive. And when all those roles were stripped away, what remained? Just me. And I didn't know if I liked that person. But something strange happened in that silence. Somewhere between the memories and the numbness, I started to listen not to others, but to myself. I started writing again, not for anyone else, not for likes or approval, just for me. Sentences that didn't need to be pretty, thoughts that didn't need to be fixed, wounds that didn't need to be hidden. I started to realize I didn't need anyone else's permission to exist. I didn't need to explain my pain to be allowed to feel it. I didn't need to be perfect to be real. There were days I hated myself and I allowed that feeling. There were days I missed people who hurt me, and I allowed that too. I let the shadows sit beside me not as enemies but as parts of me I needed to understand, because you can't heal what you refuse to look at. And I had spent years looking away from myself. Some nights, I would sit in darkness, not out of depression but out of choice. I stopped being afraid of silence, stopped filling every moment with noise or distraction. And in that stillness, I met someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Me, not the broken version others left behind, not the fake version I created to survive, but the raw, unsure, honest version. Flawed, wounded, but still here. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Healing doesn't come in a moment. It doesn't come with a quote or a conversation. Sometimes it just begins with sitting in silence, looking your shadows in the eye and saying, I see you, you're part of me, but you don't control me anymore. That's what I started doing. Not perfectly, not quickly, but consistently. Because if no one else was going to choose me, I had to choose myself, even if it was hard, even if it felt selfish, even if I didn't feel worthy of it yet. So now, when the shadows come, I don't run, I let them speak. And then I speak back, because I'm not afraid of my darkness anymore. I lived in it, and I survived. For years. I carried a scream inside me, a scream so loud, so raw, but no one could hear it. Not because I didn't try, not because I didn't want to be heard, but because it wasn't a shout. It was a silent scream, A scream trapped behind locked doors, behind clenched jaws, behind eyes that refused to cry. That scream was my pain, my anger, my fear, my loneliness. It lived in the space between my ribs, pounding like a storm I couldn't release. Every time someone hurt me, when betrayal struck, when accusations fell, that scream grew louder, but I swallowed it because I was taught that pain should be quiet, that vulnerability was weakness, that silence was strength. So I locked it up, but silence is a prison. And the walls grow smaller every day. The scream wanted out. It clawed at my throat. It burned in my chest. Sometimes I thought if I just let it out, if I just yelled, cried, raged, maybe I could finally breathe. And then one day, I realized the scream wasn't meant to be silent anymore. It needed a voice to say, I am here, I am hurting, I am not invisible. So I began to tell my story, not to seek pity, not to blame, not to relive the pain for others' amusement, but to reclaim my truth, to take back control, to say this happened to me and I survived. Telling the truth was terrifying. Every word felt like opening a wound. Every sentence made me vulnerable. Every confession was a battle with fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. But each time I spoke, the scream lost some of its power. It softened, it turned into words, into stories, into healing, because sometimes the loudest scream is the one finally heard. Now, I stand not as a victim, but as a survivor, not as someone broken, but as someone becoming whole. My silent scream became my voice, and with that voice, I can finally be free. After the scream found its voice, the hardest part began, not the telling, but the healing. It was a slow, uneven path, littered with setbacks and doubts. Trust didn't come easy. Hope was fragile, but every step forward mattered. I learned to say no. I learned to guard my heart. I learned that self-love isn't selfish, it's survival. And, though the scars remain, they no longer define me. I am more than my past. I am growing, and for the first time, I believe I can be whole again. I have been broken. I have been used. I have been silenced, but I am still here, like a phoenix from ashes. I rise scarred, yes, but stronger, wiser, more real. My past does not chain me. It fuels me. It teaches me. And every day I choose to live, not just survive, to speak, not just whisper, to hope, not just endure. Because I am more than what was done to me. I am the author of my story, the keeper of my truth, the light that no darkness can ever fully dim. This is not just my survival. This is my rebirth, and I am ready to soar.